Which of the third-year players will be the best this season, and who will be the best down the road wearing a Jazz uniform? Find out next on Locked On Jazz.
You are Locked On Jazz, your daily podcast on the Utah Jazz. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello and welcome into Locked On Jazz. My name is Leif Thulin. I'm excited to be back with you, filling in for David Locke on Locked On Jazz. As many of you guys know by now, I'm a lifelong Jazz fan, credentialed NBA draft analyst for Locked On NBA Big Board, attendee of the 2023 and 2024 NBA Combine, Jazz broadcast assistant, statistician, and lover of college basketball. So I'll make sure you need to know everything about the Jazz, and I'll help you guys get prepared for another season of Jazz basketball. It's just around the corner. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. So right now, new customers can get $150 in bonus bets when your first $5 bet hits. And today on the show, I'll be breaking down the games of the three third-year players that I think have make or break seasons for how their tenure at the Jazz will be. And I'll explain why I believe that. And I'll tell you what I think their roles will be for both Keonte George, Taylor Hendricks, and Brice Sensabaugh, and how I see them evolving beyond this year should they make their role. And if it doesn't go well, I'll explain what I think breaking is. So I'll talk to you about what I think this year and how likely it is they'll stick as Jazz man of the future and build once the Jazz are out of the rebuild. So let's dive right in. Let's start with Keonte George and his evolution and get to what I feel we can be certain of about Keonte George. There's been a lot of uncertainty about Keonte George. It started with him playing the point guard his first year, and everyone's saying, well, you know what? He's new to the point guard. Maybe we give him some time. And then the answer became, from many at least, oh, well, we don't think he's a point guard because he's never played the point guard, and now he had natural struggles. So is he a guy in our future? I don't know. Like that's the sentiment that followed Keonte George. And in year one, he was given the opportunity to be the starting point guard and in the NBA as his first time playing point guard. Like, I know I just said that, but I just want to reiterate it. Imagine playing basketball your whole life, and then you play the most demanding position offensively for the first time in the NBA your first year on a team that just doesn't have the weaponry. And of course, it's not going to go as smoothly. And so I think people are being overly critical. For the long-time everydayers, I even outlined before that season guys that he reminded me of as high-end outcomes for him as after being the 16th pick of the draft, because I was pretty happy with that pick. And I came up with Jamal Murray, and that was a comparison that became popularized. I actually came up with that in the season before he went to Baylor. I saw him play for Baylor in the before the season began against Canada, and he scored 37 points, and Italy scored 32. And the guy was unbelievable, hitting step backs and everything. I was like, well, that looks like Jamal Murray. So it's Jamal Murray and CJ McCollum as guys who are two guards for much of their life and have had success as shooters and scorers, setting themselves up, but they've made themselves better as NBA players by adding passing to the repertoire and becoming point guards. I then talked about every stop that Jamal Murray made in his career. Murray was picked higher, he was ranked higher, scored more at every level. At Kentucky, he scored 20 a game. Keonte scored 16 at Baylor, and he went higher in the draft. And then in the NBA, Keonte got the keys sooner than Jamal Murray did. And that's a lot of responsibility. He had the ball in his hands, but he wasn't necessarily amazingly successful as a point guard. He showed flashes. And that caused some to believe that he'd figure it out, and others to be skeptical, voicing inefficient shooting, a lot of turnovers, not getting our offense ready. But then what caused this whole debate about Keonte George, the point guard of the future or not, is when Danny Ainge said, we don't know if he's our franchise point guard. And that wasn't a revelatory statement, but everyone took it as oh, that's an indictment on Keonte George. It just meant that the fact that he's being evaluated means the Jazz thought highly of him, to me. They just didn't think of him as a point guard as highly as you'd hope if you wanted to find your franchise point guard. So then let's go to last year. He was in his second year. He had a crack at being the starting point guard to begin, but then was replaced by Isaiah Collier from that role, and now can do what he does best with clarity in mind and responsibility taken off, and the game became so much simpler for Keonte George. He was scoring the basketball. He will be, and always has been a scorer. That's what Keonte George does. To me, this is what is the most clear of these three. Keonte George is a clear-cut sixth man where you can hope he can emulate the career of Jordan Clarkson, or better yet, a Lou Williams or a Jamal Crawford. A sixth man who scores the basketball, and he does so well that though his defense will never be very good, you still want him on the roster. So let's go through his statistics. His first year, he went 13 points per game on 39.1% shooting, 33.4 from the field, 85% from the free throw line, and 4.4 assists per game. So last year, his numbers were about 16.8 points per game, 39.1% from the field, 34.3 from three, 81.8 from the line, and 5.6 assists. So his points went up by about 4 points per game. His assists went up by 1.2. His field goal percentage remained identical. His three moved up marginally. So he improved absolutely everything except for his free throw percentage, which was still a very good free throw percentage. And yet the discourse has largely been negative. And that's something I don't necessarily agree with, because I think Isaiah Collier getting the starting role was a symbiotic relationship for those two. Keonte George improved everything when Collier took the reins as the point guard because he had less to worry about and could just focus on scoring the basketball. And Keonte helped Collier because he can also dribble and he can also create, hence the 5.6 assists per game. And they worked well together. Now, here's where this part becomes important, because for him to factor into the Jazz's future, he needs to become a really good scorer to compensate for the fact that defensively he's quite poor and likely will never be great on defense. But he does show moments of more engagement when Will Hardy has lit a fire under his butt. I've been in a lot of press conferences, and Will Hardy's usually pretty stoic and thoughtful before he responds. But occasionally he'll get him to light a fire and be like, look, we need better defense from X player. He said that about Keonte George. And despite Keonte George being an undersized two, he has the athletic traits to be solid. He's got the body and movement style that should allow defensive competency if engaged to defend. And that hasn't happened for a prolonged level, but there have been individual games where it's been noticeable after Will Hardy calls him out. So my concluding statement on Keonte is we know what Key can do. We know what he can do for the Utah Jazz. And how will Key be a rotational piece? It's as a sixth man for the Utah Jazz. It's the archetype that Jordan Clarkson popularized. Thurl Bailey goes flame on, and that's Keonte George now. How well he does it and how vital he is to the Jazz's rebuild as the Jazz hopefully emerge out of the rebuild soon, it depends on how well he rounds out his game as a defender, and perhaps more importantly, just how well he can shoot the basketball. Because 34% from three is not good enough for someone who's 6'4". It's not good enough for someone whose game is dependent on the gravity of with how he shoots the basketball. I mean, Keonte George has the capacity to shoot the lights out. He hit 9 threes against the Warriors. He scored 30-plus twice against the Warriors. He shows up in big moments. He's got a tendency to want the ball. He's not scared, and that's something that's important. But I do think if he keeps the same diet of shots, because he's not a dynamic driver, his value will be seen as higher due to being a known commodity for scoring if he can find a way to shoot a couple percentage points better. And, of course, that's something that's intuitive. Of course, you want to shoot better. But I think it's very doable. I think more time not playing the point guard helps him shoot better. His catch and shoot will be important as opposed to doing it all off the dribble. But what he does so well, and what Jamal Murray and CJ McCollum, the ones that drew the comparisons for him, was his ability to knock down shots off the jump shot and off of the dribble, and doing so on difficult shots. He needs to take fewer difficult shots because he doesn't have that license to do so yet. And if he can shoot the ball in ways that make him that Jordan Clarkson, those difficult shot making, but doing so more efficiently, it makes him hard to overlook for a period. Whereas after year two, last year, there's a lack of certainty about his future at the Jazz. That's the way I feel looking in. That's the way I hear many people discuss Keonte George's name in terms of like, oh, is he going to factor into the Jazz's future? I think many people are pessimistic about that. I think if he shoots 37% from three, and let's say he scores 18, 19 points in year three, that's a resounding success at pick 16. Is he an automatic shoe-in as a starter? No, because of that. I don't think so. I think his role is set in stone. He's a sixth man. Like, of the young guys that you know what you're getting back, I think his role is the most clear-cut of anyone. Kyle Filipowski, you don't know if he's going to be the offensive juggernaut he was in Summer League. You don't know that. You don't know if he's going to start. You don't know if he's going to come off the bench. You don't know if Taylor Hendricks is going to be healthy enough to to be the defensive guy that we really want him to be, along with adding shooting that was 39% in the final 2 months that helped his percentage up so much when it didn't matter in his rookie year. Like, those are things we talked about. You don't know what Ace Bailey's going to be. You hope he's going to be fantastic. You don't know what Cody Williams is going to be. I think you know what Keonte George is, and I think he has a role in the NBA, and his efficiency will tell you how much of a role it is for the Utah Jazz. It's a big make or break year for Keonte George. Speaking of make or break year, Taylor Hendricks enters this year with a lot of believers, but what will his role be, and what are the reasonable expectations for a guy coming off of a brutal injury? All that and more straight ahead on Locked On Jazz. If you're running a business, you know that every missed call is money left on the table. Think about the last time you had an urgent need, maybe for a plumber or a service provider. If the first person didn't answer, did you wait? Probably not. You moved on. That's why you need OpenPhone. OpenPhone's the number one business system built to streamline and scale your customer communications, all from an app, or it's available on your computer as well as your phone. OpenPhone lets me manage business calls and text from a single app. OpenPhone is offering our listeners 20% off your first 6 months at openphone.com/lockedonnba. That's openphone.com/lockedonnba. And if you have existing numbers with another service, OpenPhone will port them over at no extra charge. That is sensational. OpenPhone, no missed calls, no missed customers. And I also want to tell you all about our friends at Murdoch Hyundai. The Murdoch family, you know this already, but they've been in Utah for over 80 years. The reliability, dependability that is second to none. And Hyundai is the best car for your money. Safety features, bells, whistles, and all amazing cars for amazing prices. The SUV lineup is so strong with the Kona, the Tucson, the Santa Fe, and the Palisade. I've driven the Tucson and loved it. They gave me a fantastic experience with Murdoch Hyundai and Murray. And I went through the ballroom where they had all these different cars. And if you're into electric cars, the Ioniq 5 electric was named the Motor Trend SUV of the year by Motor Trend. The new Ioniq 6 was even better. Electric, looked like a Porsche, and won the World Car of the Year. And there are 3 locations, Linden, Murray, and Logan. I've been to the one in Murray, and the guy who was helpful to me talked about being a Locked On Jazz daily listener and every dayer. So shout out to you, and I'm sure the people in Linden and Logan are equally as fantastic. So make sure to go check out Murdoch Hyundai and get yourself a new car. Welcome back to Locked On Jazz. Leif Thulin with you here. And Taylor Hendricks, he's someone that I think Jazz fans mostly have a positive feel for. Like, it's going to be a thought in most Jazz fans' mind that he was fantastic to finish his rookie season, and he shot really, really well then. And the first 3 games before his injury, there was a lot of notable improvement. He looks stronger, he looks more confident, and defensively, he took on the bigger assignments. Like, he was guarding Luka Doncic before he got hurt, and he took on those big assignments, and that's brought up optimism. Now, I hate to be the bearer of bad news, but I think Taylor Hendricks is polarizing in the sense of he was hurt in a gruesome way last season. Everyone's rooting for him. He is not polarizing in that sense. Everyone is rooting for him, but I think there's a polarization that there's a legitimate argument. He's the one with the most to prove among third years because there's a timeliness to what the Jazz need. What the Jazz need is a defender. The Jazz need someone with Taylor Hendricks' archetypal defensive capabilities. I'm not sure he has them, but his archetype possesses him. Someone with long arms who can block shots on the weak side, who can defend multiple positions and shoot and make it open threes. It's the highest end of what a 3-and-D possesses. And Taylor Hendricks has those traits. And what the Jazz need and what makes him polarizing is that the Jazz want to get out of this rebuild shortly, and they've drafted a lot of guys who are offensively oriented, and they need 1 or 2 of those guys to hit, but they also need someone on a similar timeline to hit with the defensive traits. And that's what Taylor Hendricks brings. And why he's polarizing is if he can't do so, there's going to be the sentiment of, oh, it's his second year because he got injured last year. But also, the money would tell you okay, he was paid last year, he was paid the year before. You got to retain your rookies. Is he someone that we want to keep? And that's why this year is a make or break year for Taylor Hendricks, because he needs to show his vitality to the Utah Jazz's rebranding, repurposing of what their roster does. Like, the Jazz were a team that contended for the playoffs with Mike Conley, Donovan Mitchell, Rudy Gobert, Bojan Bogdanovic, Royce O'Neal. The Jazz then shifted to having Lauri Markkanen, and the Jazz were kind of in purgatory for a little bit, in the sense of, we can win 30-plus games. We might even get to 40 in the play-in. They sold off Mike Conley. They sold off other guys. In the last 2 years, the Jazz have been quite bad, but took too long to get there. Last year was the first year the Jazz really bought into being bad. They bought into being bad, and they got Ace Bailey. And that's not a bad result, but it wasn't Cooper Flag. This year, it's going to be the same thing. They're going to be bad, but it gives the opportunity for Taylor Hendricks, among other players, to prove their vitality to the organization for when the Jazz are good again. So let's revisit. Hendricks had a great finish to his rookie season, and that made many forget about his woes early in the season. And I'm not trying to be harping on the bad, but I do think you need to show the whole picture. They were treated far differently than Cody Williams is. Hendricks was not a good defender his rookie year. That was theoretical, not actually applied in practice. The Jazz had to play zone when Hendricks was in his first year, and he was a complete dare shooter. I vividly remember a game against the Lakers where they waved at him, like, disrespectfully, like, oh, let him shoot the ball. And he was like 1 for 6 on wide open corner threes. He ended up shooting 39% due to a very good April to close the season. Everyone anointed him more valuable than Keonte, who played the whole season. Yes, he had some issues, but he scored 14 points a game as a rookie. And while Taylor Hendricks had flashes, they were not undeniable of like, oh, wow, like, he's an amazing defender. And they weren't as frequent as many would claim. They happened at the end of the season when teams didn't try as much. I will say, last year I did see a lot of flashes before he got hurt. I saw confidence boost, and that's what you expect from year 1 to year 2. So year 3, you've seen players miss their first season. Blake Griffin did it. Ben Simmons. He's not the same level of player of those guys. But my point being is, sometimes just being around an NBA gym, rehabbing an injury, and just accumulating knowledge, assimilating with what the NBA has to offer, thinking the game, being around the game, can really help mentally. And I think the red shirt season, if you will, can help Taylor Hendricks. So how large can his role be? He's huge now. He's enormous, put on weight. I've seen him walking around the facility. I've seen him at Summer League. You see videos of him working out in Spain, and he's huge. He wants to be a good defender, and that's something that's important. He really has the mentality that he believes he can be a good defender, and if he shoots it well, he has a spot in the NBA for sure, because there's not many guys who shoot it well and are that big. And he's got a really open spot for contribution on the Utah Jazz. That said, he'll battle for time with Kyle Filipowski, whom I think is a worse fit. Filipowski is a worse fit between Kessler and Lowry, but he has progressed a ton, and he's not going to have the question of health that Taylor Hendricks has and will have for himself in the back of his mind for a decent portion of this season, in my opinion. That also being said, there's no John Collins in the way. There's not other guys, but Kyle Anderson factors into the equation as well, as just kind of a guy who's in the front court. He's got length, and he's the Patty Mills. He's going to be a veteran who doesn't play a ton, but if there's struggles, will play. And so if Taylor Hendricks struggles early, I think that means it's going to be Kyle Filipowski and Kyle Anderson playing a lot. And I think there's something to be said for the fact that both Ace and Cody are tall. That makes it possible that they play minutes at the 3, even though I prefer both of them play minutes at the 2. And that eats up minutes where Taylor Hendricks could play alongside Lowry, and they slide because of Lowry being 7 feet tall, despite wanting to play the 3. I think it's possible that Lauri Markkanen plays the 4 next to Ace Bailey at the 3 occasionally, and that eats into Taylor Hendricks' minutes. So my goals for Taylor Hendricks are very simple. I want him to average north of a block per game and north of a steal per game. And in 3 games last season, he averaged 3 stocks. So that's very attainable. And stocks is steals blocks. It was 1.3 and 1.7. So that's very attainable. And if he averages north of 25 minutes per game, which is what he averaged in those 3 games, make that 3 stocks per game. And I think that's doable. So I just want activity. I want activity and defensive results. Secondly, I'd like to see 4 3-pointers attempted per game, much like last season. In 3 games, he shot 37% from 3. In 3 games, he shot 17% from 3 on 4 attempts per game. That was fluky. It was bad. I want him to be around 37% from three on 4 attempts, which is more than he shot his rookie year and a slightly lesser percentage, which I think is more truthful to what the percentage of competency is. And defensively, it's the biggest goal. I want to see his strength and physicality on display and not reliance on recovery using athletic traits. So I think Kyle Filipowski I said this in the previous episode, I think Flip has a higher ceiling than Taylor Hendricks due to his rare offensive attributes and the gifts that very few 7-footers possess. But Taylor Hendricks' ceiling is more attainable to achieve and maybe easier to incorporate on a winning team that the Jazz hope to be, as he possesses a very plug-and-play winning game. And if it's fully evolved, I think that the Jazz get Taylor Hendricks back from the nasty injury. Don't rush him back, but you play him enough, and then by the end of the season, he takes off and starts playing better. It'll be really indicative of how the Jazz front court looks for years to come, because if Hendricks plays well, I think that you can use kind of a offense-defense combination. Filipowski can come off the bench, and Hendricks can start, because defense with some of these lineups is going to be more vital. And I really think that Hendricks slots in the way that you really need. I talked about this at the beginning. What he brings in theory is exactly what the Jazz need. And so if he hits his ceiling, I think he's the more valuable asset than Kyle Filipowski, because if Kyle Filipowski hits his ceiling, you don't know exactly what the role is, because I don't think that's your star, and you don't want a defensively inept player playing in the front court, while you also have a guy who then would clog the paint next to him and Walker Kessler. Like, I think there is clunkiness between Filipowski and Kessler, and I think there's a smoothness and defensive fortress between a fully actualized, as opposed to theorized, Taylor Hendricks and Walker Kessler. So with Ace Bailey involved and all these guys involved, I think that you really, really want to see the athletic traits become real for Taylor Hendricks. This is the guy I'm most intrigued to see this upcoming season. And I'll be very curious to see what the playing time looks like between Kyle Filipowski, Ace Bailey, Cody Williams, and Taylor Hendricks, and also just how he looks after such a gruesome injury. The last player we're going to discuss is the best shooter on the roster, other than maybe Lauri Markkanen. But what role does Brice Sensabaugh see in year 3 after a standout summer league? That and much, much more straight ahead on Locked On Jazz. Summer sports are in full swing, and whether you're all about baseball under the lights, golf on the green, or high-stakes soccer action, FanDuel is the best way to make every game more exciting. You already know, if you're already following the action, why not make it a little more thrilling? With FanDuel, you can get in on the game while your friends are getting sunburned at the beach. I've been using FanDuel to track my favorite matchups, and the app keeps it fresh with new daily promotions and fun ways to bet. I love tennis, and so I watch a lot of the tennis, and the U.S. Open's just around the corner. Wimbledon was fantastic. And that's a way that I like to make my plays on FanDuel. And you can do sets, you can do games, different stuff like that. And with baseball, it's intensifying. The trade deadline just passed, and your favorite teams might have just gotten stronger. It's easy to use, fast to pay out, and makes even regular season games feel like must-watch events. New to FanDuel, new customers can bet just $5 and get $150 in bonus bets if your first bet wins. Open the FanDuel app today or visit FanDuel.com to get started. All righty, welcome back. Third and final segment. We're talking about our third-year player, and that's Brice Sensabaugh. Brice Sensabaugh can shoot the cover off the basketball. Like, that is the sentence. He is a certified sniper. Brice Sensabaugh, I did some digging for you guys. He shot 49% on catch and shoot three-pointers that were quantified as open last year. He shot 44% on all catch and shoot threes. So he shot more threes that were not open. He shot 40.9% on guarded catch and shoots. The guy can really shoot the basketball. At Ohio State, he scored 16.5 points per game as a freshman. That was 20 pounds overweight and would use kind of like, I'm going to jog into the mid-range and step back and shoot. Not create that much space. It would just be with his body. He would never drive downhill. He would just use his body and step back. He can shoot the basketball at a very, very high level. His game almost at Ohio State was like reminiscent of Joe Johnson. You knew that wasn't how he was going to play, but the dude can shoot at every level, and the 3-point shot is better than I even anticipated in the NBA. So he can play offense for a long time. We talked about this with Taylor Hendricks. What does he have to show to make himself invaluable to the Utah Jazz? For Taylor Hendricks, we just talked about defensively, he needs to show switchability, get some weak side blocks, and shoot threes at a decent clip. And he should be a guy that the Jazz have on their roster when the Jazz come out of this rebuild, if that happens. Brice Sensabaugh, it's less clear because he can really shoot, and he's going to be a really good shooter. But defensively and awareness-wise, he's below average, and that may be putting it nicely. His shooting may make him a true commodity at some point in his NBA career, and I think that's going to keep him around because let me reiterate once again, he can shoot the cover off the basketball. And it's out of his hands quickly. It's pure. He plays a wing position that in today's NBA is looking for shooting. But what the NBA necessitates today is defensive ability and ideally the versatility to play multiple positions defensively. And that makes his job less of a certainty. That makes his NBA job and his role less certain to be something that he has for a long time. The other issue is he'll come off the bench in all odds because I don't think him starting over Ace Bailey. I don't think you see him playing over Hendricks or Flip alongside Ace Bailey. And so likely he comes off a bench. And that lineup, the way I see the game going, is Walter Clayton Jr., Kyle Filipowski, Keonte George, Yusuf Nurkic, and that puts him in the lineup in some capacity. And there might be Kyle Anderson, and bear with me now. But the guys I listed right there are, with the exception of Kyle Anderson, are all horrendous defenders. And I'm saying that about Clayton assumptively. Like, you don't know that he's going to be a terrible defender, but I'll tell you this. Clayton is the worst defender on his national championship team, and he's a small guard in the NBA as a rookie. Those guys are not good defenders. Keonte, there are some statistics you could find that would say he's been one of the worst defenders in the NBA the last 2 seasons. And Kyle Filipowski is among the worst rim protectors in the NBA in his rookie year, and defensively got attacked every time you'd switch when he played the 4. So Brice Sensabaugh does not help that group defensively. Now, the Jazz could run that lineup out and just try to outscore teams, and I don't necessarily hate it because I don't think the Jazz have aspirations to win this year. We know they don't. Let's just call a spade a spade. But I think that it makes very obvious how poor Brice Sensabaugh is on defense, and I think that hurts him because if he does not shoot fantastically, there's no value. And that's really difficult to have a spot in the NBA, especially on a team that intends to contend soon. You just have to have multiple skills. There are very few one-trick ponies that are 6'6" in today's NBA. I also don't think you'll see Brice play over Ace, and I don't want him to play over Hendricks. So I think his role to prominence means he has to shoot at an unbelievable clip. I wonder if that means he has to become the guy who comes flying off pin downs and shoots movement threes like Duncan Robinson. Like, maybe that's his avenue. Maybe there is a world for a guy who can shoot so well from 3, but is inept on defense. So how can he make himself a long 10-year Jazz man, someone who is there knocking down big shots, much like Kyle Korver did in those Jazz days, or much like guys, if you want to go way back, like Gordon Girashek, guys like that who knocked down threes and were not particularly good defensively, that knocked down threes and timely ones that came off the bench. Like, that's the archetype I'm giving you right now. I think he'll have to shoot over 40% from 3 this year. I think that's very doable for him. And the other thing that keeps Brice around at a level he does better than most, especially at his size, is he's a very good rebounder. And I think that's his other strength that he had in college. When I've evaluated him as a scouting prospect, I think I had him 20th in my board, and he went 28th for the Jazz. So I liked that pick. And the other strength is rebounding. But I wonder if he can rebound and bring the ball up the court. I think he's got a tendency to play a bit selfishly, even in summer league, where he was red hot. I think if he's able to rebound and rip, bring it up the court and orchestrate offense, maybe that's another avenue and show more of a passing. But I think he can be a good defensive rebounder, and that supplements the shooting as a secondary strength. It's not as powerful of one as defending or passing, but if he can rebound the ball, bring it up, I think that he helps himself become a more likely to be a lifelong Jazz guy. Maybe not a lifelong, but get out of the rookie contract and get to a second contract with the Utah Jazz when the Jazz I assume will be better, and I really, really hope we will. So, in conclusion, to me, Brice Sensabaugh is in a bit of a pickle because due to the organization's recent draft picks and the team-wide ineptitude on defense, his shooting, though rare, its value gets overweighed by the need to develop the Ace Baileys of the world, the next guy, the one that we think could be the guy, the Filipowski, because of his rarity of size and skill combination. And so those guys need the ball more than Brice Sensabaugh, even though he can really score the ball. You're not going to see him isolate. That's not the game that he has in the NBA. He did it well at Ohio State. Those guys will get isolations. Those guys will get pick and rolls. He won't. And then the other thing that the Jazz need to develop and cultivate is those with defensive upside that they have drafted. That's Cody Williams and Taylor Hendricks. And so I think Brice Sensabaugh is in the middle of that, and he's in a pickle because the other guys are higher priorities. So I don't know if you guys agree with me there. I think shooting is very, very valuable in today's NBA, but I just think that his skill set is too one-dimensional for the way that the Jazz are trying to build their roster, and it overlaps in a Venn diagram. Yes, his shooting is stronger than others, but Ace Bailey can really shoot the basketball. Walter Clayton can really shoot the basketball. And so there are guys that can do that and possess other skills that are likely more than ancillary pieces. And I think Brice Sensabaugh is an ancillary piece in this rebuild. So let me know what you guys think. Maybe I'm being too critical, but that's just my honest assessment of what Brice Sensabaugh is. Obviously, if he shoots really well, rebounds well, he can have a spot. And it's really hard to part with someone who can shoot the ball as well as Brice Sensabaugh does. But I think the Jazz will have to make decisions. They have too many young pieces on a young team. And each year the Jazz bring in all these different rookies. That's the reason the Jazz didn't keep some of the picks last year in the draft, because you just can't have 3 guys each year. So 9 guys under 22 years old. And that's just not sustainable. And so I think in years to come, you're going to see more draft picks taken, and a couple of these guys that will now be aging up 3rd year, 4th year, 5th year, not be on the roster anymore. My guess is that Brice Sensabaugh would need a fantastic season to be retained, and I'm hopeful for it because, man, he's worked really hard on his body. He looks far more in shape, but he just lacks lateral quickness, and the Jazz have been so bad defensively. I think that there's going to be a necessity and an intentionality about cultivating guys with defensive upside, namely Cody Williams and Taylor Hendricks. And, of course, the Jazz are going to try to groom Ace Bailey to be that dude. So my guess for Brice Sensabaugh is he scores well, might even get close to 10 points a game for the Jazz this season, especially once the season's over in terms of winning aspirations. I wonder if he really puts up some numbers, but I wonder how many he's responsible for giving up. And as a final conclusion, do the Jazz value his shooting more than developing the guys with two-way potential offense and defense? So let me know what you guys think about my assessment of Sensabaugh. Of course, about Keonte George. Is he the sixth man of the Jazz's future? Do you agree with that assessment? Do you want someone different? And what do you think about Taylor Hendricks? Do you think my assessment was fair? And do you think he can be the answer to the Jazz's prayers defensively? So thank you guys for making Locked On Jazz your first listen today. For your second listen, find the Locked On NBA podcast, where there is no offseason. Doug, Matt, Hayes, and the crew keep you up to date on contract negotiations, rumors, and everything you need to be the most informed NBA fan. Find your Locked On NBA podcast on YouTube, wherever you listen to your podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Thank you guys for listening. Really appreciate it. I'll be back with you next week, and I'm going to try to do more. I did 3 this week for you. I'm going to try to give you 5 next week when I'm back in town. So have a great day and enjoy. And as always, go Jazz.